I mean, this webinar is hosted. Receipt Bank and Futrli, as I'm sure many of you do know, and I've got the lovely Ollie from Receipt Bank in his orange t-shirt on the call with us as well. We've partnered for a very long time offline, but we've officially partnered online in the last month or so, and it's really to reinforce the importance of accurate real-time data. And I know everybody's known the importance of it, but I think over the recent months, it's never become more apparent that things need to change to make sure that businesses have access to their accurate information when they need it at any one time. And the reason that we have asked Richard to join us today is that Richard and Will luckily already had this very effective process in play, which meant when lockdown commenced, they really did have many of their ducks in order to make the decisions that they had to make very, very quickly. Because I think that's a challenge that I know that our companies have faced. Trying to make decisions whilst also trying to get your ducks in a row is almost impossible and has cost a lot of people a lot of time and a lot of money. So both Richard and Will are going to talk very, very frankly about it. Richard, from the business owner perspective, I will just move on to the intro slides. Richard, you can see there is the owner. I mean, I've been on your Facebook, Richard, so you be warned of the photos in today. Richard, he is the owner of the brilliant Urban Jump, which, I mean, just looks incredible, and I actually want to go and immediately play. But I know that he's going to talk very frankly about the size of business, the numbers they're dealing with, and really, I guess, the help that Will and his team have put into play to get them through it. Will, famous on the accounting landscape, you need very little introduction, but of course is the owner of Farnell of Clarke. Ollie, do you want to do a little quick intro from your side of why you're on the call as well?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So I'm Oliver Smith. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Receipt Bank. Prior to that, I was at Xero in New Zealand, where I led the sales team there. And so, having a good understanding of kind of the New Zealand cloud market is significantly more advanced than the UK market. So it's quite interesting to see how things are evolving in line with what I've seen over the last few years in NZ, which of course was the home of Xero. Yeah, I'm also an accountant, qualified a long time ago, so please no questions about financial reporting standards, because I'm not up with the play on those.
Will, is there anything you want to add about Farnell Clarke that you think that people don't know or that you would like to share before we kick off?
No, just in case anybody doesn't know who we are, we're based in Norwich. We are about 50 people in our team. Set up 13 years ago. We were probably one of the first 100% cloud practices globally back in 2009. So we've kind of lived and breathed this stuff for quite a long time now, and we've got loads wrong. And my objective in life is to share all those things we got wrong.
See, including me unable to use slides. You see, I get that wrong. I was trying to move your faces out of the way and I managed to move slides on. Sorry. Did not mean to take your glory moment, but yes, well, you've definitely been the leader of the pack in this. Richard, I am actually going to move the slide over. I'm going to skip past the agenda because who cares about agenda? You tell us about you and I guess Urban Jump, your background, and just give us the reason where it all came from.
Okay, just picking up on something that Will said, he's made lots of mistakes along the way. He's done most of them with me, so that we've learned along the way. So that's been great fun. Just a bit about me. So Will and I, we went to school together. We've known each other for about 108 years. So the relationship was already pretty strong anyway. Interestingly, my background is not too dissimilar. So I joined the Big Four consultancy firm. Originally as a chartered tax trainee. I realised that was possibly the most boring thing that could ever happen to me, so I jumped ship and I became a consultant. So I've never had a proper job in my life, which is great. I've just told others how to do theirs. But that job took me all around the world, all around the country, which is great, but that eventually started to take its toll. I struggled a little bit with life balance. It kind of all got a little bit unhinged, so to speak, and never really at home. So that's kind of where the genesis of where I started looking for things to do outside of consultancy, get out of the rat race. I'd done some property investments. I owned some properties, but they never really supplemented the decent London income that I had, and that was always a bit of a barrier. But kind of word got out locally that I was looking to jump ship from my London job. And a couple of people approached me with this idea of a trampoline park of all things, completely and utterly unrelated to anything I've ever done. But it kind of tweaked my interest and I wondered, how much viability there was in that. And I started clawing through the numbers and had a look at what can only be described as the crappiest business plan I've ever seen in my life that these guys presented to me. And it started from there, really. I kind of...
when was this? What year?
So in November 2016, we opened the doors to the public. So if you wind that back, this all started from absolutely nothing in January of 2016. So from nothing, no idea, no concept, no business plan, no money, no clue, still got no clue, no brand, no premises, nothing. By 2016, that November, I'd opened the place to the public, and that quickly got split off to, first year we made 1.3 million quid from nothing.
Wow.
So we, it's a bit of a race to riches. Sadly, there was a big hole in the bottom of that bucket, and I think we'll talk extensively about that. Some of what's happened over the past 3 years has all been about really the importance of data is what we're here to talk about. But the importance of data to my business can't be understated, can't be overstated. I'm sorry. It's we've had, the business cost well in excess of £1 million to build. And in order for me to raise that capital, I was pitching and punting and creating business plans and all sorts of stuff. And I raised that capital, but a lot of it was done through asset finance leases. And that's really been the bane of our life and the cross on our back for the first 3 years, and to a certain degree still is. But incredibly positive business in terms of how quickly we built it, how strong that brand I think is locally. And actually we've won awards for that brand. We have a huge footfall. Like I say, we're about £1 million a year revenue business. But my costs to start with were cripplingly about £100,000 a month, of which 40,000, or the thick end of £40,000 a month, was asset finance lease costs. Incredibly expensive business.
Crikey. And I mean, what was the decision? What was the reason behind setting it up like that and taking money in that particular way, which is not the cheapest way to get money?
Absolutely not. Well, the truth of the matter is, Helen, if you look at the background that I was coming from and the experience that I clearly did not have in either running a business, setting a business up, and certainly not in the leisure sector or anything like that, you're immediately looking at a much smaller pool of lenders who are willing to help. If you think back to that period of time, 2016, that whole market had opened up very quickly from Australia, I believe, and America had picked it up quickly, and there was a rush for the gold. And the market was inundated with people trying to find enormous premises that met the regulations that was very loose at that time. So you need a very large premises with a very high clearance ceiling space. You need parking facilities, but there was money in that, and people ran to this thinking that they could just run this thing, jump on the bandwagon and make a lot of money. So there were an awful lot of asset finance lease companies who jumped into that sector to willingly fund. Now, they're fishing in a barrel, really. They've got lots of inexperienced people run into this stuff. They're charging premiums for it. And I was the biggest jump out there. I had 22 of these leases running. And like I say, for the thick end of 3 years, I've had 22 leases costing, they started at £40,000 a month. Incredibly expensive. But through working with Will and with Ben and his team, we've managed to chop our costs down over that period to, we're about 43,000 all in every month now. Those leases are down to 4, I believe, from 22. And our balance sheet now is comprised much better finance, very few third tier lenders like that, and the interest costs have come right down. So we've really, really smashed it hard. And now we've got a profitable business, but we're still, cash flow is always going to be a bit of a problem.
And what was kind of the role of Farnell Clarke, or well, not specifically Will, but Farnell Clarke in getting that business off the ground to begin with? Like, did you engage with them before you even started, when you had just the business plan on a piece of paper, or was it kind of, was it on your own to begin with?
No, all on my own. I mean, just a bit of background I perhaps jumped over was I'm a chartered accountant. Laughably, I'm a chartered accountant. You'd never guess it. And I qualified in, 50 years ago or something. But I would run the numbers. I had the spreadsheets. I'm still a spreadsheet jockey. His inbox must be under a weight of collapse with the rubbish I send him. But I did originally pick up with a partner who has since been bought out. That relationship just did not work. We won't go into that. But I came to Will because the utter mess that his accountancy, his advisor, had made of my business. It sounds like a fairly relatively straightforward business, but actually you'd be surprised the amount of transactional traffic that runs through that account. So Will was brought on board as a kind of hold on, this is just a joke. This guy doesn't even know how to account for a lease. I think I know a bloke who might do. So I called Will, and he didn't know anybody who could count for a lease either. So I asked his team, and they did. So that was good. And ever since then, we've been, hand in glove. Really, every decision I make, I check if it's all right with Will first. So.
Well, where did you start? So you've kind of got this big sort of messy spaghetti junction pile of information and leases and asset loans and cash coming in. Where did you start?
So it was the start point was trying to get it into. We put it in zero. Is the first thing, and we showed Rich how to use the seat bank, and that was the start. We literally recreated the accounting records from the day Rich opened, to give us some clarity over what was going on. Rich was paying for bookkeeping that didn't seem to really be happening because he didn't know what was happening in the business. So we just rebuilt it from kind of the day that they started spending their first money on architects and everything else, and got it to a point where we could pretty much look at the first period of trading, which took Rich to 3 months of trading from when they opened the doors, and the 9 months of pre-opening trading, and that's about the point that we took over. I think it is about February 2017 that we took over, but we had to kind of just build everything up so we could get an idea of what was going before we could have any kind of conversations about what steps Richard could take in terms of getting a handle on what they were doing.
And how long was it till you had actual clarity for that first piece, and then you got to start unpicking it?
Yesterday I got that. I'm just looking at my notes now. I'm still struggling.
I would have thought genuinely it probably took about 6 months.
Okay.
To kind of get to the bottom of all of the even getting to the bottom of the leases was a huge undertaking in terms of piecing them all together. And as Richard said, the point that everybody just wanted to kind of get this funding into their business. The way that it was all structured was just like unbelievable in terms of I didn't know that you could finance cables to toilets and whatever else it was. Just unpicking it was an interesting exercise.
It kind of illustrates, doesn't it, that we're talking about COVID at the moment, like or the rest of this conversation, but this is before anything to do with COVID happened, and SMBs are complicated at the best of times. When there's no global pandemic happening, you're actually got a lot of mess and difficulty and complexity to unpick before you can get to that kind of real-time data and decision making. And so when you layer on what's been happening the last few months, just blows it out the water. So I guess that leads to the next question, really, like what was your plan for this year before we saw COVID hitting? Like, how were you tracking and how were you getting on, and what were you aiming to do?
All getting rosy, wasn't it, Rich?
It was all pretty good, mate. Yeah, we were just about knocking on the door of Easy Street, and then some idiot licked the bat somewhere down south, and we've been in trouble ever since. No, in all seriousness, so 2020, so these. Going back to these leases, incredibly punitive entry costs, incredibly expensive interest rates, all personally guaranteed to Muggins here, and just have been the bane of our life for the entire period up until the 3 years. But the plan was that we would go through that and we would aggressively try and get them off the balance sheet, and we did. Largely speaking, we did. We've managed to post profits now, but we've also managed to carry this enormous great cost of finance as well. So the plan was always that by the end of April, so we have a seasonal business, so I'll just give you some context. We have a very seasonal business. So our peak months are between October right through to the end of April. That's when we flourish. We have May is kind of lackluster. June, you might as well shut the doors because there's no public holidays, kids are at school. July starts to creep up, and August is pretty good. So that's our kind of our seasonal swing. So my plan was always, and Will and I had always had in our mind, by year 3, April end, if I could keep up with that aggressive repayment regime of those leases, we would have 5 leases left on the books, but we would aim to have £50,000 in cash reserves. Now, given the business turns over £1 million, that sounds like peanuts, but that's like a pot of gold to us, because we've never been able to retain cash. That's why the real-time data has been so important to us, because we've had to watch every single penny. And I've been on the back foot for 3 years, facing off against 22 creditors, and I'm pretty feisty at the best of times, but it's difficult when your pockets are empty. But we've done it.
I was going to say, so even before we get to 2020, surely whilst Will's trying to put the pieces together, all you can do is, you've got this hefty cost going out each month. All you're trying to do is get as many people in through the top of the funnel as you possibly can. No consideration to efficiency or pricing, and it's just volume of people in to make sure that you hit that monthly cost and that your runway doesn't get shortened.
Yes, and on top of that, I mean, it's certainly a footfall business, so it's a high volume, low cost business. So you can imagine the impact has been 100% catastrophic since March 21 when we shut down. So nothing has been earned. We've got a business interruption claim on the table at the moment. I'm sitting on a committee that we're running against our insurers, who are all digging their heels in about not willing to pay. I've lost well over £200,000 of revenue.
I want to know how happens. I'm going to pause for 1 second, because I just want to get a very quick picture before I go to lockdown, because I know lockdown is horrific, and the story, and I want you to tell the full stories of kind of lockdown. But you had how many people through your doors before this kicked off? How many people were you getting through your doors each month, roughly?
Crikey. Thousands and thousands. I mean, just to give you an idea.
How many sites have you got?
Just the one site. It's only one site, and a lot of times people look at this, and I do take an enormous amount of pride in the brand that we've created, and I do that because of my background. So I, having worked extensively for EY and for Ernst & Young, for EY and for PwC, that's basically been my career. I've always seen, and I've known as I climbed the ranks there, that the power of a brand is enormous. So when I started this business, I always said, the brand that I build into the business plan will be something you'll be able to just stick on the walls and you'll know. And everything we do is branded. If you look on Facebook, if you've looked on my Facebook page, you'll see nobody moves without getting a sticker on them from me.
Your children are branded. I found that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, only red and black clothes. That's it. Nothing else. So, really, really important that we do that. So I've been on, our coverage across the web, I've taught myself some of that. So some of the interesting stuff is in my consultancy career, I never really knew what I knew, bugger all, I reckon, but I still don't really know what I know, but I found out I can learn a bit of stuff, and I've sort of taken personal hold of the marketing side of it. So everything you see on the web, all of the digital marketing, that's kind of primarily been me. I know nothing about that. I'm an accountant, for God's sake. But very strongly branded stuff. So we are very, very well known. And in terms of numbers through the door, off the top of my head, Helen, I can't honestly tell you, but in terms of reach,
what were you doing then? How do you know you've had a good week? It's just looking at the cash balance in the bank?
Yeah, pretty much. I'll be honest with you, it's largely cash. We know what our forecast is for the month on month. We're always keen on that. Because there's quite a few things that you can buy in there. It's not just a single product. There's a number of things you can do. So we try and get as many people through the door with as high spend as we can. So we'll push big corporate dues. We'll push party bookings because those are the ones that make us the better return. So it's not so much just purely the numbers. If they're all coming through for a single jump, that won't be as good for us if they're all coming through and 50% are at parties and corporate bookings.
No,
so it's that kind of thing. But our numbers, our revenue numbers, our cash in bank are the things that really keep me awake at night. I sleep like a log, but
should you be awake at night? That's what you think about.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Let's talk about, you brushed on it then, but let's go into the detail of it. Look, you obviously getting thousands of people through the door. That's what you were focusing on. Will is sorting it out. You need them to spend as much as they can, and boom, the whole thing shut down. What did you have early indicators, or was literally the rug pulled out or the trampoline pulled out from under your feet?
So no more insight than you guys had. I mean, we started to see a decline in numbers around late. So February was actually a stonking month. We did an absolute. Okay. I wouldn't mind just if I were to pick a time, and given that you guys know a little bit about the difficulties of the first 3 years funding this business, if there were ever a time that somebody said you've got to get through a pandemic, it would have been March of this year. Okay. And the reason for that is we had an absolute stonking February half term, well in excess of 100 grand revenue. we stuck money in the bank. Had that pandemic happened any time prior to that, I think I wouldn't have been on this call. I'd have been at the bottom of Beachy Head, I think. So it couldn't have been any better timing. So, and it's actually coincided with our quieter season. So aside from missing Easter this year, we actually haven't suffered so badly as you might think. And we had cash in the bank, which means that we were liquid for the first time ever. We really were.
But I guess one of the scary things during it is that we now know that we're reopening in time for the summer holidays. Okay, that's the good thing. But we didn't know that. So I guess there's that horrible period of what the whole, what happens if it doesn't open? What happens if this is it for the next 6 months? You can't have anyone back if it keeps creeping up. How did you and Will work through those sorts of scenarios? Because 100 grand in the bank is never going to last that long.
No, not when you got Will's fees as well. It's so how do we deal with that? Well, I think we were, like I say, we've come from a position of incredible difficulty. So I think Will and I just put pandemic on our to-do list and figured it out. It wasn't a big deal because we've faced big deals from the get-go. So I don't think either he or I are panickers about it, although I've had a few moments. But we knew that the money was there. We also, the first thing we did is I sent out a letter, and I made it very clear that all payments stopped, so all direct debits were cancelled. That's not a comfortable place to be as a business owner. It's not how I like to play things, but what else could you do? So we turned the tap off. All the outgoings were stopped, regardless of the response from creditors, really. Although that response has been really good in the round.
Landlords, let me make a guess. Apart from your landlord,
can I swear? I won't.
I will swear on this call. I have done, probably about 30 of these calls over the past, these sessions with different business owners. Every single one of them has had problems with the landlord.
Yeah.
Not one of them has had a landlord that said, it's okay, we're going to help. We've taken mortgage repayments. You'll be fine.
I'm so worried about saying something bad. I'm almost tempted to hand this answer over to Will because I'm not sure. I'm stood near a window and I might go through it.
Let's just say you've hit the nail on the head. We've had some interesting conversations around that pre and post COVID. But I think the point was that Rich and I have spoken a lot over the last few months, and often I try and I can't become a bit of a counsellor at times, in terms of just trying to kind of focus on the positivity and what the options are. And Rich quite rightly was, given the history that he's talked about, was very reluctant to look at new debt. So CBILS and everything else, that the whole grant situation just flew past, because despite being a small business, the rateable value of Urban Jumps building is over the 51k, so there was no grant money available. That's been a whole battle that Rich has fought as well.
Are you still fighting it? I mean, what's happening?
Never give up, girl. Never give up. I'm like that character in The Knights of Knee. I just keep coming back. I'm like a Rottweiler.
So which of the government, we may as well talk about financials. So which of the government schemes then? So obviously you've got all these various grants that were floating around. Were any of them applicable to you?
So we got the rate relief, and we got the VAT quarter deferment. So all the standard stuff. The one that really stuck was the one that Will just alluded to, that just because my place is huge, 26,000 square feet and rateable value of 100k, I didn't get any help. Now, I don't understand the logic. The only logic that springs to mind is the government was looking at something, that overly cliched word, unprecedented, and they needed to move quick. I get it. So, the 80-20 will just throw something out, and let's just hope most of it sticks and it was right. Well, I think it probably was, but I've heard so many small business owners who really have got small businesses who've received money and have said to me quite blatantly, I haven't got a clue what to do with all this cash. Like, you're kidding me. I've got 42 staff on the books and £100,000 rate bill and God knows what else, and I can't get it. So that's stuck in our claw a bit. But I've rallied around, and I've got really into that, and I've pushed very hard. And there's now these local discretionary grant funds. I've gone in for round one of that, didn't get it, got bounced back. The answer they give was, ironically, your rates are too high. I was like, wow, that's great. Thanks for that. But then I went again. I worked with the local MP at Lehman Brothers when I was there, a guy called Hugh Merriman. And he and Caroline Ansell, who are both local councillors, have jumped on our case. I really have laid it on thick. We created over 100 new jobs for for a business in a very rural setting. Ironically, I'm called Urban Jump. I should be Rural Jump, but I'm not.
Where are you actually based?
Heathfield. So we're I always describe it as 14 miles from everywhere. So we're 14 miles from from Eastbourne, from Brighton, from Lewes, from Tunbridge Wells, that area. So we've got a 360 catchment area. So we do really well because of that.
And talking of the jobs, Richard, how did you manage your staff through this? So did everybody get furloughed? Did you have to lay anybody off?
No, nobody's lost their job. Everybody got furloughed. We're starting to bring them back this week. Latest post on Facebook, you'll see some of my guys are back in there. We're PPEing the place now, and it looks phenomenal. Everything's branded, obviously. Nothing's not branded. So they're coming back now. My wife is the operations director, so she's the one who could answer that far better than I. But we use another tool with Will called Deputy, which is a phenomenal little tool. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. Terrific stuff. You know, that was operationally one of the biggest challenges we ever had was managing our staff, because it's a fairly transient group of people. They go to university, they come back. God, it was a nightmare. With Deputy, it's so easy. But all of those guys have been furloughed, including myself and my wife, and they're coming back. So, and obviously there's this government incentive scheme where you want to get people back with I think it's a net income of 500 quid a month or whatever it is. So we're very, very staff focused, and we had no intention of losing staff, and I don't think we will.
I guess one of the big questions on the financials is, you said right at the beginning, it was to get the most amount of people in the top, spending the most amount of money. Clearly, social distancing, PPE, what's the impact on that? Have you started to look at the metrics around, we've actually got a reduced capacity of 25%, therefore we need to charge more, or we're opening longer hours? What are you doing?
So we've done all of that. I mean, you have to do that as part of the CBILS application. And we worked, myself and some of the team over at Farnell Clarke, we put together a really, a dossier, I would say, that was a comprehensive CBILS application. Feedback we got from that was it was probably one of the best they'd seen. We only got fired back 2 questions. It's a really good piece, and one of those pieces was a 3-year finance forecast. So, we've gone through the forecast line by line, and where we essentially got to is we've had to introduce lots of capacity limitations. So from 128 people an hour, I'm down to 40 initially. Still got a huge venue, so we can clearly socially distance. That's fine. But we're looking initially at a quarter of our capacity, quarter to a third of our capacity. So we are going to be hit for a while. But I'd always been knowledgeable of that, and with money in the bank, I'm not so worried about that. And I do think this is about a digital marketing campaign that's about rebuilding that customer confidence. And if you look on my LinkedIn, if you look on my social media, we put a lot of money into our advertising campaign, specifically messaging that stuff. We're already getting we're already getting bookings now. We're not open yet. So we are definitely going to take a financial hit. There's no doubt about that. But on the back of that, we've got the VAT situation at 5% for the next 6 months or so. We've got, I expect to see that confidence build and those numbers get up to 50, 60, 70%. And perhaps, I was on an HSBC's chief economist webinar yesterday, who described the rebound in his mind as Q3 would expect to be very, very good. Q4, pretty good. And then there's a long, prolonged tail from after that to get back to pre-pandemic levels. So it's not a V. He described it more of a bungee. But so my peak season should be pretty good. And I'm hopeful of that. And, like I say, the cash in the bank has always been the concern. And we're now not really in that place. We're trying to rebuild confidence and build up as much footfall again as we can. So we know the impact is going to be there.
Do you have like an on-site cafe or anything like that, so you can qualify for to help out? We've got seating. We've got 2 restaurants, or 2 cafes, not restaurants. That's a bit blowing it up a bit. 2 cafes there.
It's Will with a flask, isn't it? It's Will's got an old granny flask.
Yeah, that's it.
Ones with pump tops.
His little picnic hamper and bonnet on. Yeah, that's him. So we've moved tables apart. I don't know if we're going to go for that eat out to help out. I don't think people come to Urban Jump. Even I would admit I wouldn't fancy going to Urban Jump for a 3-course meal. It's not happening. So I don't think we're going to bother with that one. I don't think there's much in it, but yeah, we basically took last year's figures and we kind of chopped them hard. I'm always a big believer, an accountant in all of us will say, hope for the best, expect the worst, and chop the hell out of the numbers. So we did that. In fact, the bank came back and said your first forecast was too good, so we chopped them some more.
Well, I think this is the interesting thing about people's forecasts going forward, especially with your C-bills. I mean, have you forecasted it coming back? That there's another lockdown? Do we dare even to say those words? But
no, let's move on. Next question. If it comes back, I'm joining Farnell Clarke, mate. That's what I'm doing. I'm shutting the doors and joining Will. I'll get that.
Dust off your accounting textbooks. Yeah.
It's too hard. If it comes up again, I'll put it in the too difficult pile. I'm leaving.
But I mean, I guess, do we have to, I mean, is there a case where we have to, if the R rating goes up, I'm not saying lockdown comes back, but have we got a case where we've got a capacity to reduce it down further? Have you got moving room to take it? 40%. You can go.
We do, but I think you're then creeping into that realm of, well, it's cost versus benefit and return. Where do you get to where at 20% capacity I'm making losses? What's the point? So we're not there now. We're definitely not there now at 40, and I think we will see that increase. We're okay. We're making decent money. We're able to pay off these remaining debts. We're still servicing debts. If I've given anybody the impression that there's not debt on the balance sheet, I didn't mean to do that. There is, but the debt is very different now. So we have an obligation to keep paying those things. And whilst we can do that positively and not making losses, we'll remain open. So, yeah, as it stands right now, the forecast we've got and a growing return to customer confidence, I think we're fine. If it was to come again, I think we'd look long and hard about, okay, what does that really mean? Are we just better off slamming the hatches down and just hoping for the best? I don't know. Don't know.
I mean, Will, how important, I mean, this is about data accuracy. So how important was having everything in order before we went into this? Because I think that's the point you made at the beginning, because you've done that hard work, and Ollie was absolutely right. Thank God you've been through Spaghetti Junction for the 6 months before this hit, because you're in a prime position. But what difference did it make? And I guess, have you seen other cases where it has cost people their businesses or cost people way more than it has cost Richard?
No, I mean we've been as a firm, we've been quite lucky. I'm going to treat it as luck anyway. That I think we've only lost one client directly as a result of COVID up to now.
Okay.
Now I'm kind of quite aware that we haven't seen the brick wall yet. The brick wall is yet to come. So we're certainly not out of the woods yet. I think certainly in Richard's case and the 60-odd% of our clients that we're regularly processing financial data for, the advantage of that has been that when it comes to C-bills applications, for example, the data's there.
Yeah.
It's not a case of we did year end 8 months ago and we've now got to rebuild 12 months of data to get to a point where we've got the information we need to submit a C-bills application. And as Richard's kind of alluded to, it's at the lockdown bit could have been much worse. It's actually the challenge that we've had to help Richard through is these really big finance leases, and there's been a number of occasions where we've had to kind of sit down and make decisions about, okay, we've got some cash coming here. What should we pay off? What's the most effective use of this additional funding that we've been able to get our hands on? And it's at those times that the value of the data has really come out, and we've had clarity over what's gone and what's coming, that we can make those decisions fairly quickly.
I guess, Will, as a business yourself, right? You've got about 50 staff. You've been through an impact of COVID, not just for your clients and helping them manage through it, but the impact to your own business as well. And I don't want to put too many words in your mouth, but like as a fully cloud digital practice, being able to transition to a fully remote team, how big of a pain was that? Compared to, if you look at probably the vast majority still of practices in the UK who are not fully cloud and that maybe only have a small subset of their clients on it. Like, I'm sure you've talked to some of your peers, in the industry who've massively struggled through this time in terms of adapting their practice to be able to work remotely.
Yeah, I mean, it was we went into lockdown before lockdown. Pretty much, we said to staff, I think at the end of the week before lockdown actually happened, that everybody go and work from home. We've had flexible remote working, work where you want, when you want, for the past 18 months or so. The only kind of weird thing really was on the Friday that everyone was kind of heading home. They were walking out with monitors under their arms. It was as if we'd just been kind of raided.
Is that looting, Will?
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like.
Jesus, sounds like Portland, Oregon.
But we'd got the phone systems in place. We were ready to go, and actually the team have done a cracking job. I think the big change is the fact that we still had lots of team members that liked coming to the office. So there was still a culture shift for everybody to be working from home. And it's going to be really interesting to see how those kind of attitudes and behaviours change when they don't have to work from home.
Well, question for you, Will, I think, because I mean, the daily bookkeeping, I do want you to talk about how you do manage that in your practice. But one step further, during this period, of course, of your 50 team members, they are going to be having quite strategic conversations with their clients. How do you control and monitor that and ensure that the advice and information they're providing is the right advice when you're not in an office and they're not there to come to you for a quick debrief?
Yeah, it's collaboration. I mean, we run Slack, so each of our and when we talk about how we do daily bookkeeping, that kind of directly overlays here in terms of the pod structures that we operate. So we're running almost micro teams within the business that look after everything to do with a particular client. So Richard deals regularly with Ben, who's one of our seniors. He's Richard's main point of contact. Ben works in a team of 4 people, and the client managers have kind of managed that process. And I don't want to go too far because I know what the last slide is and what's the key learning, and I want to save that for later.
Ollie's already gone, why have you got slides? We can cheat them.
So I'll reiterate it then again at the end, but I think that the final question is like, what's the biggest learning during lockdown? And I think the biggest learning isn't for me, but it's for my team. And you and I have known each other for a long time. And we've had lots of conversations about advisory and what advisory is. And I think I've talked to my team till I'm blue in the face about what I think advisory is. But I think what's happened over the last 3 months is they've all seen it. Yes. So all of a sudden, every member of the team, whether they're one of our apprentices through to our client managers, they've all had clients like Richard calling them and asking them about stuff that isn't to do with their VAT return.
Yes.
Or their end of year accounts. And all of a sudden it's like, well, all of these clients are asking us things about how we manage lockdown, how we deal with furloughing, how we raise money. And these are all questions that they've never been exposed to before.
Of course. But the biggest takeaway is, of course, they've got to start where Richard and you started 6 months before lockdown, which is getting the data accuracy right. It's getting the receipt
Absolutely.
Zero. Yep. Because you cannot give. I mean, when Will was talking to me, by the way, the amount of time that we've known each other talking about what advisory is, you know, for years of going, it's just help, but you cannot give help off the back of duff information.
Yep.
You wouldn't have got your C-bills. You can't make decisions about what you can and cannot borrow against, what staff you can bring back, what you can't bring back, unless you actually know your numbers. And the only way you can know them is by truly having that daily accessibility. How often do you two talk, or how often do you talk to Ben, Richard? I guess if it's not Will's pretending to be Ben, but how often do you talk to Ben?
Yeah, but Will, I very rarely get to speak to now. He's too lofty for me now. I can never get through to the bloody bloke. So, but Ben, poor sod, every day, pretty much every day. It's regular. Yeah, he's an absolute superstar. If it weren't for Ben, and I'd have given up long ago. He's so invested in it. That's something that, you know, I'm all about. I've always bought people. I can help them out, and I can put up with people who just can't do things if they're great guys. Ben he's just a superstar. He's absolutely invested in helping them.
They are.
Yeah, I think he genuinely cares. He's genuinely on this journey. He's felt every lump and bump and punch we've taken in the face, and he's right there with me, and it's great. You know, you can call him up. You know he's going to care, and he does. He's great.
But Will, I would guess a tricky question. You do not have to give actual numbers, but how do you charge for that as an accountant? That's the tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, we
Will.
again, some of the things that Helen, some of the things that you and I have talked about is the importance of relationship.
Yes.
And this is that whole point about time versus output. And Richard doesn't care how much time we spend doing stuff. Richard cares about the quality of the output that we deliver. So we charge based on quality of outputs. It incentivizes us to work as smartly and as efficiently as we can, and we have a relationship with Richard that means that Richard will advocate us to people he knows, and that's the value. We're investing in long-term relationships. We're looking at lifetime value, and all of that stuff that is what drives and grows our business.
You've also set tech up, and I'm sure, sorry, Ollie, I'd cut you off then, but
okay.
It's you utilize tech to get rid of the laborious tasks. You are an incredibly tech-based firm where actually the time is spent doing the advisory, the help piece. The rest of it is done with the automation of the likes of Receipt Bank, isn't it? Sorry, Ollie, what were you going to say?
No, I guess it was just going to be a bit of a question around that pricing model. There's still a huge amount of accounting practices that charge, on an hourly basis or in 6-minute increments is kind of the classic. And it's more of a question for Richard, really. Like, do you think you'd be able to have such a good relationship with your accountant if every time you spoke to them on the phone, you knew that they were going to start that clock and start charging you tick tock 6-minute increments? That's another 20 quid or whatever.
Yeah, no, tight as a, no, I wouldn't call them. I wouldn't be interested in that. Like Will says, I'm paying for quality. I I come from a 6-minute time booking background. It's ridiculous. My charge out rates at PwC were an EY were eye-watering, so I would never pick up the phone. So I'm not about that. For me, no, absolutely not. If I thought it was going to be every time I say hello, it's going to cost me 100 quid, I wouldn't bother. It's about that quality. It's exactly what Will said. I know that these people are invested in my firm, and I'm totally invested in Farnell Clarke, and I'll always advocate them guys. I'm trying to, I know loads of partners in London, and I'm always trying to throw their name around because I know they do a great job.
And it is the long game, and Will's right. This ultimately will give the biggest return. It will. Will, a question for you that's come in. It says, what does keep accountants awake at night in these times?
I don't think it's any different to any other business owner. I mean, we have 50 people, and we've got to make sure that we can keep those people in jobs. It's no different. We've invested personally. We've accessed funding to maintain our headcount because we want to continue to deliver that value to clients like Richard. It would have been very easy for us to furlough a whole bunch of our team, but then we wouldn't have been there to service clients. And I think this is where the huge opportunity is for firms. I've talked to lots of accounting firms over the last few weeks and months, and one of the common things I'm hearing is I've talked about kind of, are you focused on growth? Are you building? And they said, well, no, we're not really growing. We're not really taking on new clients, but the clients we've got have been really, really positive about the way we've supported them over the last few months. And that creates a question in terms of, well, why do you think that is? So what do you think has changed pre-COVID? And the answer is obvious. Every 2 weeks, they've gone out to those clients and they've given them updates on what government policy is and what new measures are in place. So every 2 weeks, they've started speaking to their clients proactively. And the direct result of that is all of a sudden their clients are really positive about their interaction with their accounting firm.
Yeah.
So how do we build a way to continue to do that over the longer term? And I'll let you into a secret. One of them is daily bookkeeping.
It is. We want to know how you do the daily bookkeeping. Just one question I have, and I will move off the slide because we've answered all these questions. But I guess we talked about KPIs at the beginning. And KPIs, are they any different for you now, Richard, of what you're actually measuring? I know you're still going to look at the bottom line, but I guess what else are you measuring? What are those lead indicators that you are controlling day to day?
Well, so I think they're probably not quite as financial as you might think. What we did, over that 3-year journey, I had to learn a whole lot of new skills. And one of the things that I realized for my business, at least, is the importance of web traffic and the importance of that engagement on the website. So one of the things that I've taught myself to a certain degree, is I've rebuilt that website with a view that online journey is one that starts with a brand and ends with a brand, and we get that conversion rate. So one of the things that we were looking to ramp up significant spend around my digital marketing and that rebuilding of the website, and focusing very, very hard on that, because once they're on the website, we know they stick and spend. We know that. So that was really something that kind of fell through the cracks in year 2, I think, because we just had a static flat file website and we lost some traction there. And that was largely because we were in this fight and survival mode to try and refinance the business. And, there were personnel issues in there as well. I had a big legal fight with my ex-partner, all sorts of other things that were going on that just took me away from the sales side. So it was a case of cost management and holding on for dear life. And I think now we've kind of got through the real center of that storm. Towards the sort of middle of last year, we started to again look at that criticality of that website and digital marketing, and we use now remarketing and all sorts of things. Yeah. So actually, I'm sitting watching YouTube the other night, and I was watching something about UFC and Dana White, which is one of my big passions, and up pops my ad. So it's great to see our brand comes up with the UFC. So I love it. So we're spending an awful lot of time. That's really where I think we in the business that we had, we were such a big noise in the area that first year we smashed through £1 million revenue from a standing start, which was incredible. But we've been up and around that, but we haven't been back over the £1 million mark, and that's my goal, is to get back up to that. And that's going to be trickier now, clearly, but I think the key to that is continued strength of branding and that trust and that customer loyalty, but expanding that customer footprint. And the way we do that is through digital reach.
Well, I think there is now that you've got your bookkeeping on, I think this is often where things get mixed up.
What I was going to say.
If you have your bookkeeping, your financials are your lag. They're a result of lots of things happening at this end. And what I think, you can spend a lot of time staring at your cash flow, and you can have a report that says, shit, you run out of cash. But unless you've got your books in order, so you can go and take that step back and look at the lead indicators that affect that lag, that's what business owners should be doing, because then they can truly control it. And that's what Will's enabled you to do, by getting the numbers right, by knowing that engine is running. You've got petrol in the tank. You can now steer it round the corners.
Exactly that.
Exactly what business owners should be doing. And I think there has been some real distractions by just kind of looking at just cash flow, because you'll still crash if you stare at the fuel tank. You've got to do the other things that feed the business. It does lead us nicely, Will, into talking about daily bookkeeping, because actually it is so important. And I think the rhetoric that the whole world is moving into now is enabling business owners like Richard to spend their time looking at the websites, measuring what's coming through, looking at the ROI, looking where they should spend more or spend less, what keywords are working, what's not. You guys have done that by kind of owning that daily bookkeeping. How do you do it, though?
Yeah. So the first point is we I shouldn't say this, Richard, on the phone. He'll be asking for a discount. So we average about 4 minutes per day per client in terms of daily bookkeeping. That's been our kind of big metric that we've talked about quite a lot over recent years. Now businesses like Richard naturally take longer because they're a bigger business. Others take less. But the way you get to that point is you go through a pain barrier. So it'll get worse before it gets better. So it's really easy for them to start it and they give up before they actually get there, because you have to combine people, process, and technology in a considered and concise way. It's no good having great technology if you've got people that won't use it, can't use it, don't want to use it. So how do you get the right people doing the right bit of the job, using the right technology, and following the right process? And process is really important. And I get lots of people say, yeah, but if I'm doing it daily, that means I've got to log into the file every day. Surely that takes longer. But we create what we call habitually good habits, because people get into a habit of doing something in a particular way and it becomes second nature. So that doesn't happen overnight, though. It takes time for people to get to that stage, and it's using the right technology tools. I often talk about Receipt Bank as being our bookkeeping management solution. It's not a data extraction tool. It enables us to manage the way we do bookkeeping. that's why it's so important to us in terms of enabling that process. And I think the other bit is the structure. So the structure makes it work. We spent a lot of years trying to get our structure right. And where we landed on was this idea of a pod structure, where we have essentially a manager, a senior, and a couple of trainees, and they're managing everything for the client with the exception of payroll. So they do bookkeeping, VAT returns, year ends. They help Richard with cash flow, whatever else it is that needs to be done within that pod, and we get to know the clients really well. The benefit of doing this stuff regularly is we get to understand the client, and naturally we don't want to go to Richard every day and say, hey Richard, there's a receipt missing for WH Smith. That's ridiculous. The client would soon get pretty jarred off with that. But on a weekly basis we'll go out and we'll collect missing information. So really what our clients are looking at is data that at worst case is a week out of date.
What happens if you have a client who says, I insist on doing the bookkeeping myself, and then they're really rubbish at it? How do you deal with that one?
So couple of things. We would put fees up for the work we have to do to correct it. If people don't follow our process, at some point they won't be a client. It's really important that we own the process. So if we're not billing by the hour, then we can't manage the profitability of a job if we don't manage the job itself. So it's really important that we control that process if you genuinely want to get to a point where you can comfortably say to a client, your fee is X amount per month. And if you follow the process, that's what the fee is. If you don't, then we can't guarantee the fee.
It's that scalable, repeatable thing, isn't it? You have to be able to scale it. You can't just have this one process for Mrs. Smith, who owns a florist down the road, and then another one for somebody who owns a farm shop. Has to be repeatable and scalable, because then it's affordable, you'll actually generate profit out of it, and you can build a business on the back of it. What happens if somebody comes in and they're not using, I mean, Receipt Bank, clearly they are number one from our perspective. If you have them using maybe a secondary product that's not
we don't have any.
So you would say no, it's Receipt Bank only.
It's our process. As soon as we start using another product, we've got to have somebody get really comfortable with that product. And we've also had the conversation on a number of times, is do we get to a point where we don't take clients on if we don't do the bookkeeping? We haven't made that jump yet. We just say you need to be doing the bookkeeping in our way. I think we have to. And with everything that's going on, MTD's back on the table now. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens at the lower end of the SME space, of those 5.7 million small businesses, the 4 million that are not VAT registered. What happens there, and what impact is that going to have on our profession?
I think it's such an important mindset to have, and I absolutely love it. Like, the technology that you use is what enables your process to happen, and I think there are quite a few firms who view the technology as either something just to fit into their previous process that they were already doing and not really making the best of it, or maybe even as a way to make margin by selling it, rather than actually thinking about it as something that really just enables their whole business to work. So I really love that approach, the approach that you've got. Every client gets Receipt Bank, brilliant. Obviously, that's big fan of that. But in general, why would you want to make your business less efficient by having 7 different tools that you have to try and switch between all the time? It just
inaccuracy, because I think this is the big thing. It's the inaccuracy piece from our perspective. When we're trying to when we create cash flow forecasts, we do any kind of analysis work for any of our clients. If the data's wrong that's coming in, we all know rubbish in, rubbish out. Could be said another way, but it's got to be accurate. And I think Receipt Bank's recent acquisition of I can never say it.
I'm just going to say Xavier. It's perfect.
Absolutely shows how vital it is to Receipt Bank. They get it. That's why they've done that piece, and it just means you've got that solid entry of data coming through, by which you and your team can then provide Richard and all of the other small businesses with the ability to make the right choices. It's not really about decisions, it's choices. And you can't make choices unless you've got accurate information. I've got a slight receipt bank challenge from somebody on, so be prepared. You've both got to defend the corner here. Receipt bank doesn't have the approval element. I can't read their full name, it hasn't come up. Like, say, iComplete. It's more of an SME product, exclamation mark.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah. So the first thing is we have clients we're running approvals for, and we're working with Approval Max on that, which fits nicely in with our receipt bank and zero processing. I think there's elements of best of breed, and certainly for us when it comes to managing a bookkeeping process, I think that's a really important point here. I'm not talking about data extraction, I'm not talking about invoice processing, I'm talking about bookkeeping management process.
Yes.
And that's what Receipt Bank does for our firm better than anybody else. Approval Max is an out and out purchase order approval system that nicely integrates with Receipt Bank and Xero, which is why it fits with our clients. You could have the same conversation about integrated suites in terms of compliance. And we saw that move to integrated suites. We're now seeing a move to best of breed. So yeah.
Also, the SME adoption plays a huge part in this. And actually, a tool for an SME means the SME will use it, which means that you will have the right information there in order to take it to the next level from the accountant. It has to be appealing to the SME. And I think we use Receipt Bank as a business. And of course, it just means that everybody knows how to use it. It's dead simple. And it just gets all the information in from across the globe in all to one place. So I would argue it's a good thing to be an SME tool.
I think
just
quickly to add to that, I think this is one of the beauties of having this kind of app ecosystem rather than just having a one size fits all kind of, massive single system. Whatever you want, typically you can have by clicking the right apps together and connecting them. So, I was going to make a plug for Approval Max in this example, right? If you want multiple layers of approval, Receipt Bank doesn't have that. You can integrate Receipt Bank with Approval Max and into Xero. Problem solved, basically. If you're the kind of business that needs multiple layers of approval, you're big enough to do that. Done. Yeah. There was 2 questions in the Q&A.
I can't access them. Can you see them, Ollie? It's because I'm sharing my screen.
I can. I've got one from Lucy, actually both from Lucy. One saying, have you found that there's been a reduction in the need for daily bookkeeping as volumes have disappeared? And then I'll ask the second question as well, because I think they might look together. And this was around the advisory side of things. Is all advice not chargeable? You talked about how it's not per minute increments. How do you do an all-encompassing fee? And what about the clients that need more hand-holding than others?
Yeah.
Deal with that?
Perfect. So number one, yes, bookkeeping volumes disappeared during COVID. That naturally had a knock-on effect to some of our billings, because in some cases we clients had challenges and reduced service levels in terms of what we delivered.
Just reduced.
I generally disappeared, because you take Richard's example. Richard still has stuff going through his bank account. There were still things that needed to be done, but clearly he didn't have sales data. He wasn't buying stuff for the cafe and so on. And the second point is a really good question, Lucy, in terms of with this stuff, you've got to be absolutely clear in terms of what's in scope, what's out of scope. I made this mistake many times as I was growing the firm in terms of trying to do all-encompassing fees, and I was so dumb when I started that I would actually tell clients that their monthly fee would cover 95% of everything they ever needed, which basically meant that from that point onwards I couldn't upsell anything. I've kind of learned as we've gone on, and now we have a really tightly defined scope. We use proposal software. Make sure the client knows what's in and outside of scope, and we've done additional work for Richard over the years that's been outside of the normal monthly billing, but it's about giving clarity to the client in terms of what it is, what you're delivering, what it's going to cost, and then they can make that decision.
That's so important. I think, when I've had accountants ask me about this, the same kind of question before, I always use the example of builders, right? They give you a quote to renovate your bathroom and it's going to cost you £10,000. That's a quote for that exact specific work. If you come back and say, well, I want this different set of tiling, that's additional work. Or if they uncover some rot underneath and they say, oh, we didn't know about this and we gave you the quote, that's extra work, and that comes with more fees. So fixed fee doesn't mean that's the only amount you're ever going to pay for everything. I think that's a little bit of a misconception.
But I think the pricing, we should have a whole different session on pricing. But I think bronze, silver, gold, which is what has been the pricing of the zeros, you know, the SaaS products like us, has been adopted by the accountants, actually sometimes the accountant detriment, because what's happened is in gold, they've put everything, like you said, and then you get a forecast and a reforecast and a budget and all these other things. And of course, crikey, some of those forecasts are so enormous. You end up with some people winning, but a lot of people not winning. And that really does create that huge disconnect. And actually, it's often the accountant who ends up really losing. So I think, you know, pricing is a session. It's a session in its own.
Yeah, I've got a t-shirt for that one too, Helen. So give me a shout when you're ready.
Okay, brilliant. We'll have one of those. But look, I know you answered the question before, Will. So Richard, back to you for this one. What has been your biggest learning over the past few months?
Last few months, well, I think kind of try and take the emotion out of with the situation. I spent the first part of it feeling, you know, pretty ticked off that we'd worked so hard to get, you know, I mentioned earlier that the goal was to get to the end of April with money in the bank. And we managed to do that by the end of February with a significant amount of money in the bank, first time ever. And then lo and behold, this thing struck. So, you know, I got emotionally a bit tangled up in that. I thought, you know, if all the odds are stacked against us, this just proves it. So I think once I got over that and realised that, you know, talking sensibly and taking that emotion out of the decision to borrow money was probably the best conversation that we had. And actually looking at that now over that longer term time horizon, I think actually, yes, could strangely enough turn out to be something of a good thing for my business in terms of liquidity for sure. Okay, it's a loan. I was very reluctant to borrow again, but the dynamics and characteristics of this borrowing compared to the punitive borrowing that I started the business off with are chalk and cheese, night and day. So, you know, I'm still leveraged. Okay, that's fine. I can live with that. But I've done it in tier one lending, high street lending, personal guarantees disappear. There is a future for my business. There's a cash flow that looks very good. And so I'm actually quite upbeat, believe it or not. And, you know, like I say, it took a bit of a kick in the stomach that we got so far with so many challenges that we faced on a daily basis for 3 years to get 2 months ahead of a 3-year plan to then for some idiot to lick a bat, like I said, and then we're put right back in the bloody shit street. But, you know, I can see our way out of this, and I'm all right with things. That's probably the best lesson for me is, you know, the planning from A to B. If I was to jot that down how I thought it would go compared to how it actually went, Jesus Christ, it's nothing like. But we're still going strong. I'm very confident, very proud of what we've got. And, you know, my attention will slowly start to creep towards what business 2 is. And that will probably have Will hanging himself when he hears that news. Is he to go to Will, just make sure he's still alive. There he is.
That's probably a very good point at which we start to wrap this up. But look, your honesty has just been phenomenal. Thank you so much. What a brilliant story. And I think, you know, genuinely, I think if most businesses have come out of this and have found a silver lining. And I do think if we can help support them with the silver lining, then we will be all right. We've got an incredibly tough group of businesses out there. So look, I know both Ollie and I would like to say thank you to you both Will and Richard, for your time today. Thank you for everybody joining us. We will be sharing this out on email. Will does also support accountants. It should also be added. If anybody does want help with trying to set up these pods or with advice of how you can transform your practice, I will put his contact details in because I know he does work directly. He's got many strings to his bow, but that's
doesn't charge by the hour for it either.
Definitely not.
Bronze, silver and gold. I'd do it all for bronze.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Look, I will let everybody go off and enjoy the rest of their Thursday, but thank you so much for your time. And Richard, thank you again. Best of luck with everything over the next few months.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Helen.
Bye.